Um, I want to also just begin by thanking all of the team that's worked tirelessly behind the scenes to bring this together. Was on the call earlier this morning with some of them. Thank you, Nina, for being such a great mentor as well. And thank you, Edgardo, for just really beginning us with something that is so essential and pivotal as we understand what this sojourn means. There is a profound beauty in beginning with the end. A deep spiritual experience that accompanies a conjuring up of a vision of a world that does not yet exist, and yet to still hold on to the reality that it is a possibility, regardless of the circumstances and obstacles. And as he was talking, when I think about this endeavor, my mind immediately goes to Nehemiah, who was tasked with rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem when it was in heaps, when it was nothing more than rubble. God tasked him to go and accompany the children of Israel because they were left defenseless without that wall. And as he sifted through all of that rubble, he began to hold on to that vision that God had given him of a new wall and of a new relationship with him. And when I think of reconciliation, isn't that exactly what it is? It's the belief of the possibility of a new relationship with one another, yes, but perhaps more importantly, with our Creator, with what is the foundation of our essence. And sometimes we miss that the work of reconciliation is not necessarily to get along better with an in-law or to get along better with somebody who doesn't look like you, but the work of reconciliation is profoundly rooted in the idea that we are all God's creation. And so how do we get back to that Garden of Eden kind of ecstasy of being in complete harmony with creation? The exasperated and dispensated relationship that came from the fall, what is the process that we come back? And it's envisioning this theme of new creation. And so as I reflect on this theme, I want to share with you all, I guess it's most fitting about the moment in my life where I was really slapped in the face by this reality. I'm going to share my screen now. So, in this world of Zoom, we always worry about technical difficulties. So if y'all are praying folk, go ahead and send a quick one up for me. Okay. Are you guys all able to see that? Let me hit present. This is the moment when I was at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, kneeling before the altar. And for those of you who are thinking, wow, that name sounds familiar, I'm not entirely sure where that is. The 16th Street Baptist Church is the church where 4 little girls were killed in the bombing during the height of Jim Crow. Because this was one of the churches that was used to meet together and gather the folk who were planning on how do we dismantle the unjust civil laws and practices of the segregated South. And as a message of retaliation, they began bombing churches and bombing buildings and bombing families. I guess let me go back and give you guys a little bit more context. I had just heard the testimony of one of the sisters of the 4 little girls that was killed in that bombing. She went on to tell us about what that day meant to her community and to her family. As she explained how she knew the other 3 little girls and how they were just playing with each other in Sunday school, even Sundays prior, and what it meant for them to sift through the rubble and the aftermath of that explosion in order to find the remains of her sister. That brought me to my knees. But it wasn't just her testimony alone that brought me to my knees in that moment, because just days prior on this experience called sojourn to the past. This was my junior year of high school, so I was about 16, 17 years old in this photo. I had met and encountered the cousin of Emmett Till, who was a young man who was murdered in Money, Mississippi, who was lynched for allegedly whistling at a white woman. And as his cousin, his name is Simeon, who I spoke with, described how he loved Emmett so dearly. He was there with him that day in the shop, and Simeon and Emmett were laying in the same bed next to each other the night that they came and took away Emmett to murder him. That story brought me to my knees in this moment. I had met just prior as well people who were present on Bloody Sunday as they were marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama for voting rights. And they told of how they would meet and how they planned to go and march and bring the body of Jimmy Lee Jackson, a young Black man who was killed for protesting for the right to vote, and march it from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And they told of how they were met with dogs and batons and people who were deputized to beat them down on the bridge. And that story brought me to my knees, and I cannot begin to tell you all of the people who I met and encountered that day, whose testimonies brought me to my knees in that moment. And as I was dealing with the irreconcilable world of what we held, what I was experiencing in that moment, with the vision that God had given us of Revelation 7 and all of us being together, every nation, tribe, and tongue, I held that together in tension as how could that be when where we are right now is so far from it. That brought me to my knees. And while I was down there, they elaborated on the story of how after that bombing in the 16th Street Baptist Church, the stained glass window that they had behind the altar, which features Jesus standing there with his arms open, that stained glass window immediately after the bombing was broken. But the whole window wasn't broken. The only thing that was blown out from that stained glass window was the face of Jesus himself. The whole stained glass remained there, but the face of Jesus was gone. And so I heard the voice of God, and I knew that I was reminded that no matter what, how broken this world is right now, that God is still seeing this, that Jesus is still witnessing this, and that what broke his heart back during the times of Isaiah and Nehemiah and Jeremiah is still breaking his heart during our times of Trayvon Martin, of Michael Brown, of Eric Garner, George Floyd. Is still breaking the heart of the Lord of all the other injustices that we are seeing today, not just racially, but socially and economically and spiritually, emotionally. All of these things still break his heart. And that gave me strength to rise up from that ground and understand, while I didn't at that moment, I knew that a new creation was forming in me. That I could no longer be a junior high school student who didn't really care about the rest of the world. I was a baseball player. All I cared about was playing baseball and having fun. But there was a deeper call. A call that I believe so many of us have heard on this Zoom call right now, or are still seeking and listening, and we're just trying to figure out, how do we play a role? Where do we fit in? And that call got me up from that church floor. And it led me into a life now where I understood how reconciliation is essential to understanding what it means to be in relation with God. I've been blessed to be able to have experiences like Valerie mentioned of being a part of this Berean cohort, where I've met so many phenomenal men and women who are endeavoring in this task, some of which are on this call today. So shout out to our Berean cohort. I've been able and blessed to work with Pepperdine University in building a foundation for how reconciliation can be discussed amongst college students and even broaden out into the community. It even led up to ultimately God allowing me to speak and give a TEDx talk about this very subject. So that way we are able to give the vocabulary and the language needed for those who are wandering and weary, as Edgardo mentioned earlier, sojourners on this path, to be able to figure out where do we go from here. But most importantly, what inspired me during my trip down to the South was all of those stories of the people that I mentioned: Simeon Wright, the cousin of Emmett Till, one of the sisters of the 4 little girls, and many others, was their profound experience of forgiveness. How none of them held on to bitterness. Not one. Not one of them hated the person or the people or the system or the society that was responsible for this. Yet their heart broke with love, a profound pouring out of what could be. And Edgardo concluded with, there is no future without forgiveness. And so I want to leave it on this similar note, that I had to understand in me when I got up off of that floor, what bitterness did I need to release in order to get to that Revelation 7? Because there can be no unity in Revelation 7 without practicing what Paul teaches and Jesus teaches about forgiveness building up there. That, like Nehemiah, when he was looking at that rubble, he had to begin stone by stone. Reconciliation is a process of everything that came before that moment and everything that comes later on. And so Valerie asked us to create questions, and I wasn't able to send her in a question, but maybe I can pose it right now, of understanding what within us do we need to release in order to get to that Revelation 7 vision. What gives you hope that this is possible? Where do we go from here? Because we know what the destination is, stone by stone. It's a process. So I want to conclude just by thanking Valerie and Nina again, and everybody else on this call, as we endeavor with one another. Perhaps the most reassuring thing is that Nehemiah didn't build that wall alone. He had the vision from God, but he also had the children of Israel alongside him. And if you look at this call, there's 96 people here assembled on this call. And that does not reflect all in this world who are endeavoring towards reconciliation. So we are not in this alone. Know that and trust in that. Know that God sees you where you are, and he sees where we are headed. He's already proclaimed it. So have faith in that, and let that fuel you as you conjure up the vision and hold on to that hope of a community that is not yet seen here, but will be. God bless you all.